Welcome into the Husker247 Podcast, where we talk about the 2-0 2024 Nebraska Cornhuskers, a record that has not been achieved since 2016, something that we might be saying a lot here in the 2024 season. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Brian Christopherson, Michael Bruntz. Bruntz, what does 2-0 mean to you?
I don't know. I'm still kind of trying to digest it. It's been so long. I
Caught you off guard entirely. You were not prepared for
yeah, I wasn't expecting to talk about my feelings about 2-0, but no, it's kind of exciting. And you've got a chance to maybe go 3-0 this week as well. Imagine that.
Yeah. BC,
Who'd
when
have
you were
thought?
born, it was just expected Nebraska would be 2-0 for the rest of your lifetime to start start things off. It was the same for me too, and Bruntz.
Right.
At some point that changed. Is it sort of almost ridiculous that it's as exciting for Nebraska to be 2-0 as it seems?
It will be in time, but we can allow it for this 1 year where we're like, man, it's been a while. I mean, it just feels good to wake up Sunday morning. Like we have a message board and people are in a good mood, and it's just a good back and forth, and no one wants to set anything on fire. I mean, I appreciate that. There's a lot of like driving through the neighborhood, like every car you pass, like the last couple of weeks, a lot of just two fingers up, that you get some of that anyway in the Midwest, but it's just like every car this week is like that. Like everybody's just, you're my neighbor. You're my brother or sister. We're friends. Everybody's in a very good mood and I enjoy it.
Yeah, that is nice. We want to keep the good mood going. So we are going to continue a segment that started last week that Bruntz has dubbed BC Has Thoughts, in which we go to Brian Christopherson to give us his thoughts on the previous game. Nebraska beat Colorado 28-10. BC, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's easy to like right away kind of get lost in the fact that the second half, they didn't kind of finish this off like in that like Halloween 92 fashion style where it's like 50-0. And you kind of were disappointed that exclamation point didn't happen. But then when you step back from the game the next day or two, you get to the main theme of the night, and it was a beatdown. It was just a physical beatdown. And sometimes you just got to go back to that, like the way Nebraska's defense of line. And I think MJ Sherman used the word assaulted. We were assaulted them. I mean, they were just going to go like, we're going to just take them out. And they did play by play from the very first play. And it's a defense that all off season, everybody's like, oh, they're going to be a top 10 defense. And it was kind of taken for granted. And once in a while, you or I or somebody would raise the question, well, they still got to go do it. And Saturday night was like that sort of example, like, yeah, they're going to do it this year. I'd be shocked if this group falls off a cliff. They're just so well put together and play off each other in such a way and have so much accountability. It was just a really impressive performance by the Black Shirts. I was starting to write this, like the 94 team was on the sideline. And so often when like 90s teams are honored, I will like go to the O-line part of it, like how the pipeline, they got to set the tone on that side of the ball in the pipeline. And I think a lot of people do that. We kind of focus on that, like how that group used to have people just on their knee out of breath at the end of the game. The Black Shirts of that era had to just be just warm and fuzzy, watching a defense just take apart a quarterback of Shedeur Sanders' caliber. And I think he's a very good player in the way they did to Chad May, to Frank Costa, to Cordell Stewart. Like it just had to like bring back so many memories of like, yes, this is Black Shirts football. It's not just about stopping them. It's about them feeling it into the next week. And Colorado is going to feel that game. And I don't know what kind of season they're going to have. They might be all right because they have those weapons are going to play against other people. They just didn't play against this defense. So I think people need to really take into account how masterful that performance was on that side of the ball.
Did anything surprise you about the game? Obviously, whatever the second half with the offense, but did anything surprise you of how things played out?
I was surprised, honestly, that I thought Colorado would go away for the night in the second half, and I'll give them credit. They didn't. They came back and fought as competitors, and it was disappointing. The offense kind of had some clunky moments. I do think, obviously, the ref show got in the way, and had the Rahmir Johnson touchdown stood, or like a Ja'Cory's 50-yarder and they go in and score there, I think that would have been the exclamation point that was satisfactory on the night to people. You know what I mean? Like, they needed that one extra play on offense, and they maybe had it and then had it taken away. So I was a little disappointed with the inconsistencies on offense in the second half in a game where you've got a team just by the throat. That said, I think this coaching staff is going to see this as the perfect game to go back and, like, you got an easy win, but we have a head coach in front of us now who's like, I expected it to be 40-10. He'll say that out loud, which he said at the press conference yesterday. And that's something we didn't used to hear around here. Just that sort of candidness. But he's telling those guys that he's like, yeah, this should have been worse, and this is why it should have been worse. And they all see it on tape, and so they know that it was not close to an A performance all the way through, and that on the offensive side and special teams, of course. So I think it's a very useful game for Nebraska in that it got done what people wanted. It takes all the steam out of Colorado, which people enjoy. And it's also just great teaching tape for this team going forward. And I think because of it, they're probably not going to have a letdown this week. I really expect that they'll come out and play pretty well against Northern Iowa because they left so many things out there in the second half.
I am going to throw something at you guys that we didn't discuss beforehand, but it should be easy enough. Bruntz, who's a player from Saturday that you kind of want to highlight that you thought, played well or whatever you want to highlight about him, but give me someone who stood out for you on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, you could go down the line on the defensive line. I'll leave that group alone for the most part. I mean, John Bullock played a hell of a game. I mean, I think the kind of redirecting that play that ended on the Tommy Hill pick six. I mean, he took away the slant there. He had the big stop on fourth down. I don't recall John Bullock ever being like that, just kind of like emotional during a game. Like it felt like I mean, like if he was normally at like a 7 or an 8, he was at like a 13. It felt like for most of that game. And I mean, that had to be pretty satisfying for a guy that, was questioning whether or not he wanted to come back for this season. And, throughout his Nebraska career has endured a lot of just, crap games and those types of situations. That I think he kind of typified to me the game the other night of like, if you guys watch Nebraska play defense, compare like the attitude that they have this year and even at times last year with at any point during John Bullock's career, there's almost like a joy that they're playing with on defense. And I think I think fans really kind of feed off that whenever you have defensive players playing that way. And, I thought he was really good in the middle of that defense. And even, when Bayer went out after being thrown out for targeting, I mean, they didn't miss a beat. And, Bullock's had to shoulder a little bit more this year than maybe he has in the past because they don't have nearly the depth at that inside linebacker spot that they did before. So he was a real big standout to me on that defense that wasn't, on the defensive line.
I think it also sort of just allows me to put at ease, like they don't have Nick Henrich, they don't have Luke Rahmir, it's fine. Like they, not to be a slight against those guys, but it's not like they're going to miss them because John Bullock can play at such a high level. Mekhi Bayer can play at such a high level. BC, same question to you. Who's the guy that stood out with his performance on Saturday that you want to highlight?
Tommy Hill. I mean, it's going to be one of those games where when his draft stock is being analyzed after the season, they're going to look back at it and be like, that was nice, like against a top level player. I know Travis Hunter ended up with 10 for 110 in that game, but there is such a thing as a quiet 110. And that was a quiet 110. It was like you didn't ever have that explosive moment from Colorado where you really felt like they got away from Nebraska's defense with those guys. And they completely shut down Jimmy Horn, who I think was honestly the guy they circled. But the moment, I mean, he had the moment, Tommy did, and it was not a good throw by Shedeur, but Tommy made a kind of a tough play look cool. Like, I mean, the way he stretched and got off the ground to snag that and then just walk it in. It was one of those moments, like if you had Friday night when people are like at the bars or whatever, like, what if this happened? What if that happened? It would be a play like that someone would say, like, you have them backed up and Shedeur Sanders, who doesn't make mistakes, gets coaxed into just a monster mistake where the whole crowd loses it. And then you get the NBC telecast, which it was not good. I don't like to say that usually, but it was not good. But they did have the shot right away of Shedeur and the crowd going crazy behind him with the touchdown on the ribbon board. And that's just going to live as a meme or whatever for a long time with Husker football fans. And Tommy, delivered that play. He didn't drop it. He didn't do it. It was just a play where I think he made a more difficult play look easy.
It's funny. If you go back and watch that play, he almost jumped too early. Because,
yeah, maybe.
He kind of high pointed it, but he was like on his way down. That's how he was just there waiting for it. But I mean, it was, that was when you kind of knew it was on at that point. Like, get out of the way. It's going to be a long night.
My favorite part about that whole play is right before the snap, he backs up. It's almost like he just kind of is giving him a little extra bait. Hey, I'm going to play off here. Let's see what you do. And Shedeur took it, and Tommy took the ball to the house. I mean, it was a remarkable play. It's a remarkable play. He, I think, made himself quite a bit of money on Saturday.
He did.
With how he played. And I think what's going to be really fascinating is, do teams even throw his way between now and when Nebraska plays Ohio State? I mean, or do you just try to figure out a way to just avoid wherever Tommy Hill's at because he's that good? It will be interesting what, an Illinois or a Rutgers or an Indiana chooses to do in their passing game, and if they just try to stay out of his way.
Go ahead, Bruntz.
Do you think Curt Cignetti's scared of that? He's going to throw it there.
I think he should be. I think he should be. I mean, it's not Western Illinois coming out on the field when they play in Bloomington here, and
that's going to be
he's going to throw it there, and you're going to like it.
It's going to be like a big noon kickoff by the time we get there.
Yeah.
Classic Big Ten matchup, UCLA and Indiana coming up this weekend. Classic.
There you go. On the other side, real quick with Tommy Hill, when I was looking through the grades on Sunday, Marquise Buford having a corner who just loves to tackle. If you think about the difference, the contrast between Nebraska, they feel like they've got these DBs who love to be physical, and Rhule the other day talking about why they played Dante Dowdell so much and why they liked him in this game, going right at Colorado safety as he did at Shiloh Sanders and Travis Hunter and all that stuff. It felt like a point was maybe being made about one side of the ball has these physical dudes who like to hit, like to tackle, including the cornerbacks, and the other side doesn't. They can cover very well maybe, but they don't have all that football, as Rhule said. And I thought that was kind of a hidden comment within the press conference that was sort of a gem.
It feels like Nebraska is building itself to play bully football.
Yes,
they want to be the aggressor. They want to be the team that takes the fight to you. They want to get right up in your face. I don't know that I was anticipating that here in year two. And it's such a departure. And I don't even mean this from the personalities of the people involved, but it's such a departure from the football team that we watched for 10 years. I mean, normally you're kind of talking about how Nebraska needs to show up and respond to being punched. I mean, they were the ones kind of throwing haymakers on Saturday.
Yeah, it's why I don't want to lose the forest from the trees in that game, because the second half didn't go exactly as people wanted. I just felt it's exactly what you're saying, Schaefer. It was like okay, we're coming in with Bud Crawford, and we're going to be the team that just beats you up and makes you not want to play, and Shedeur Sanders did not want to be in that pocket. As that probably a quarter into that game, he would have rather been about anywhere else, I'm sure. So I think in many ways, that type of team that they are going to win some games, I think, going forward, where it's like 28-10, and this maybe people wish there were a few more points on the board, but they beat up the other team in the process.
All right. Real quickly, I was going to mention MJ Sherman is someone I wanted to highlight. A 3-hurry game for him, had a sack, continues to play the best football that we've seen from him. I think he's just yet another weapon they have along that defensive line, and I've just been really impressed through 2 weeks with what MJ Sherman has done. And it kind of, I think we anticipated Prince Umamielen was just going to take over that jack role, and I think MJ Sherman has shown you why he's out on the field as much as he has been. I mean, they can come at you in waves. Like, that's what's fun about Nebraska's front right now, is that you get off of the main guys. You talk about Nash Hutmaker and Ty Robinson and Jamari Butler, and yet you don't have to look too far or further down to see where you're still going to get production from everybody else. So I thought MJ Sherman had another really strong game, and Nebraska's front played well. All right, let's move into kind of looking forward a little bit. We'll start with kind of what Matt Rhule had to say on Monday. Bruntz, one takeaway from what Matt Rhule, just anything, you get the first takeaway here. We'll bounce back between you and BC on this. What's something Matt Rhule said on Monday that stood out to you?
He said that was one of the worst special teams performances he's had as a coach. That was there really wasn't much. Speaking of bully ball, I mean that's kind of the way to say it. The Buschini punted well, but beyond that, it was kind of a mixed bag. I think you have to give credit to Isaiah Garcia Castaneda with the way that he's chosen to return punts. He's returning them. There was a play early in the first half where the ball landed short, and it was one of those plays where in the past or last year, somebody was probably letting that just roll down the field, and he grabbed it and ran it back, I think 5 or 6 yards. I mean, it was probably a pretty, ho-hum play in the course of the game, but probably saved Nebraska 20 yards in field position just by doing that. So I think he's done a good job, but I mean, special teams is a big area of concern. I mean, that was a big takeaway from yesterday is they're working very diligently to get that solved. I'm not sure what that actually looks like in practice in terms of the kicking situation.
Yeah, the weird thing about it is it just seems like it's either all or nothing. They can either play a competent one, or you have it like Saturday where you miss a field goal, the coverage unit looks bad. I still think one of the worst things that happened on Saturday was the kickoff from Colorado where it fell between 3 Nebraska players. You just can't have that. Like, that's a loss of focus and potentially the loss of a football. And Nebraska's special teams play is going to get it beat at some point. Where do the BC, you got thoughts on special teams here before we move on?
I think Bruntz hit it well. I mean, I'm worried about the field goal game right now because I think there are going to be 1 or 2 games where you have to be able to trust your guy to make a 35-yarder, and when he missed that, Nebraska's defense saved his bacon and the special teams bacon by stepping right up, because that was a moment where the Huskers had given away all their momentum. It was 14-0. If CU goes down and scores suddenly, all your good work in the first quarter is gone for naught, and part of it's because you couldn't make a 33-yard kick. So that it's got to change, but it's hard to know where a guy's confidence is after he's had some misses like that.
Yeah. All right. A takeaway that you had from Matt Rhule, Brian.
Yeah, it was the comment about the other guys on the offense needing to match the intensity of Dylan Raiola. I thought that was just really interesting. He said how Rhule can know all like 120 plays, or like even in the 2-minute drill, he kind of dissects, this is what Colorado's doing, why don't we run this? Like, he's that into the playbook, which is good to hear about your quarterback, and I think is what people suspected. But kind of an interesting deal when the coach is saying other guys got to get to that level now around him, and they have to know the playbook and all that, everything that's going on just as well as he does. And so He really highlighted some freshmen yesterday. He highlighted him. He highlighted Ja'Cory Barney and just the way he loves to play. Carter Nelson got a mention as someone I think we might see pop up a little bit more going forward. So these three true freshmen on the offensive side of the ball, I have a feeling not just Rhule, but those other two are going to rise up into more prominent roles. I mean, Ja'Cory Barney could have had a 150-yard gain on Saturday, receiving and rushing. If his 51-yarder stands and they get one or two more blocks on another play, he could have had 150 yards of offense. That's how comfortable he is already in his second game.
Bruntz, what's your biggest concern with Nebraska's offense right now through 2 weeks?
I don't know. Like, I think I guess I'm still kind of being patient with it because I mean, you have to consider where they were last year, right? Like, and we talked all off season, like if this is like a team that's like 70th in offense this year, I mean, Nebraska's probably like an 8-win team. And I think we've seen flashes of good. I mean, the fact that Nebraska's +3 in turnover margin right now, that's a positive. The fact that you've through 2 games with a freshman quarterback, he hasn't turned over the ball. That's a good thing. I mean, I guess I'd like to see a little bit more of, consistency in the run game. I mean, I think it's been good at times with Dowdell. I think other times, Nebraska, not yet. And I think against Colorado, it was kind of by design, but they have not made teams pay yet for selling out to stop the run. And I think that they're going to see that more as the season goes along. And, Matt Rhule had the, we're going to murder you quote in the offseason about the passing offense that they have. We haven't seen that yet. It's in there somewhere. I mean, the one from the Colorado game that stands out the most was that Jalen Lloyd pass, the deep ball to Jalen Lloyd that was just off his fingertips. I mean, you need those types of plays that kind of loosen things up a little bit. So I guess I'm just looking for a little bit more of kind of what we've seen so far, maybe like that next step up of where they've been. Because I think they've been better than last season. I don't think there's any question there. But how can you be just a little bit more explosive with it is what I'm waiting to see in the passing game, especially.
BC Bruntz talked about Dante Dowdell. We saw this week on the depth chart, it's Dowdell and Rahmir Johnson on the top line. Through 2 weeks, are you surprised by that at all based on what we've seen?
Not from what we've seen in the games. I am surprised, though, if you backtrack to like middle of August. Like, I thought Dowdell was like maybe the 3rd or 4th guy. I knew that he was moving up, but I didn't expect it to be this fast. So I think that's pretty impressive that he's been able to accomplish that. I can see why. He lays the hammer when he runs, and aside from the fumble, he's done really well. He had a great run taken away from him on a hold on Ben Hart.
Is it the one where he effortlessly hurdled a guy in the middle of the field?
It was a great run. It was honestly, that was the run of all that he's had so far where I was like, oh man, that looked legit. Like, because he has that size, he can squat through the roof if you get him in the weight room and all that stuff. But then you see him make a play like that with this athleticism and combine that all together. So I get why it is where it is. Emmett Johnson, I think, is a really good player, but him and Rahmir are kind of the same. They do the same skill set. So Rahmir obviously is getting things done, and Rahmir would have had a huge stat day if the touchdown stands, if. But so I understand why they are where they are. Gabe Irvin's had those injuries, and it took him until like August to sort of get up to full speed. And I think other guys in the meantime got a lot done, and that's probably why it sits where it sits right now.
Bruntz, if you were to assess Nebraska's passing game, and you kind of talked about it in your answer, what do you think, in what ways can they maybe improve upon where they're at right now?
I don't know. I think more of the explosive stuff. I mean, I've been surprised that more guys haven't been involved in the passing game so far, but I don't know. Like it's hard to kind of be too critical of it because I felt like, especially against Colorado, once Nebraska got up early, it felt a little bit like they were going to accept, a little bit less of the explosiveness for just keeping the clock moving and doing that kind of stuff. And, I think I just would like to see a few few more downfield shots, a little bit more vertical of Thomas Fidone. You saw it a little. He had one catch, I guess, for 12 or 13 yards or something like that on Saturday. So I guess just a little bit more of that. Rhule is completing passes at a pretty high percentage. So I guess it's just I'm eager to see what the next kind of block is on top of what they've already done so far.
All right, let's turn our attention to recruiting. Nebraska picked up a big commitment on Monday. It was going to be Monday afternoon. It ended up being Monday evening. Christian Jones commits to Nebraska. Now, he was on radio. We're recording this Tuesday morning. He was on radio this morning saying that he was relatively close to committing to Oklahoma, but ultimately Nebraska is where he needed to be. Bruntz, how big of a pickup do you think this is for Nebraska's 2025 class and with what you know of Christian Jones?
Yeah, it's huge, especially when you consider the amount of time and energy that's gone into recruiting him. I was trying to think this morning, is there any recruit that before they committed that you can remember visiting as many times as Christian Jones did? Like, I'm usually a big proponent of like following the visits, and that generally leads you to where a guy will ultimately commit. And it would have felt like a pretty big upset if he would have gone elsewhere besides Nebraska, just based on how many times he'd been there, familiarity with the program. I think you have to very much kind of understand that Nebraska's start to this season was kind of the nice finishing kick for getting him in the class. And what he can be as a linebacker. He's extremely athletic. Nebraska kind of has that next wave of linebackers that they need to find that are going to step in the next couple of years. And, he fits that. He's kind of the ultimate Rhule guy. He's a, 50-foot shot putter, sub 11 in the 100. There's lots to like there. And that's a big win. I do think Nebraska really had to fight there, and they ultimately won out.
BC, do you this is kind of a big picture view question, I guess, for you. Do you feel like nights like Saturday sort of allows recruits and the college football world to rediscover Nebraska because they've been wandering in the wilderness for so long?
Yeah, I think so. I think it more than anything, it redirects them to like how passionate this fan base is and like everything that surrounds Husker football compared to a lot of other places. And I'm talking about other big time programs. I think Nebraska, when it is rolling or when people sense it can be special in a season, it's in that top 5 atmosphere type of place within college football. It just is. And so you get to go to a game like Saturday night, and then you're a player like Christian Jones and you're watching Tony White's defense and just the way they operate and play off each other and have fun doing it. And you hear that noise and how much people want it. It makes, you want to be a part of something where the fans and everybody want it so much. Like you mean, it means so much to them. Like in the SEC, they always say it means more, right? I think Nebraska is one of those places where that's true too. It means more. And I think recruits who actually get here realize that. And you're right. It was hidden for a long time. And so I understand why a recruit 5 cycles ago or 3 cycles ago wouldn't have seen what is there. It was hidden, unfortunately, but I think it's not right now. And I think they like this coaching staff. I think Matt Rhule is a guy we enjoy listening to him at press conferences. He's just good at communicating his message to fans, to recruits, to his players. And it pays off. And I think it worked in the way of Christian Jones in this case.
Bruntz, you were down there on the sidelines before the game taking photos. You saw what was going on there. You've read the recruiting updates from Alan True and everybody else here at 247 Sports. What kind of stands out in the aftermath of that game?
Yeah, I kept thinking when you interviewed recruits after like the events in June and then the one in July. I think this game was one that was circled for a number of reasons. Like there was extra buzz in the building because Colorado was there and Deion Sanders and everything that comes along with it. And I think a lot of people, recruit-wise, were eager to see what that was going to be like. And I think people expected a lot. I think it exceeded expectations. And that's kind of rare. You know what I mean? Like everything that happened during that game could not have gone much better for Nebraska from a recruiting point of view. And, you've got dads and recruits lined up on the sidelines trying to get pictures with Bud Crawford when he's down there hanging out with the championship belts before the game. Nebraska, obviously, if you're a defensive player, you had to have liked what you saw. And, it was also an opportunity for some guys that are already in the 25 class to kind of come back and see things for the first time this season. I mean, you had Jeremiah Jones, who looks every bit of what he's listed. I think we listed him like 6'4" or 6'5". I mean, he's a massive defensive back and a guy that Nebraska would love to keep in their class, even though Missouri is kind of pursuing him pretty hard. That was a big visit. TJ Lateef was back for the first time since the spring game and recruiting Cortez Mills and Michael Terry before the game as they're walking around the field and kind of checking things out. So, the volume of guys who were on campus on Saturday who had already been offered, who had already been to Nebraska, like this was like second, third visits for some of those guys. It feels like one of those types of events that for the 26 and 27 classes, you're going to look back on as a really big kind of turning point for a lot of these guys that put Nebraska firmly into their top groups. I mean, I don't know how you could walk away from that as like a junior recruit and not be impressed with what you saw. And, I don't think that's hyperbole. I mean, you could kind of feel the atmosphere on the sidelines. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. BC, I'm gonna throw some individual recruits at you and just your general thoughts. What does it mean when you see it's reported on Husker247 that Nebraska has maybe jumped Oregon as it relates to Michael Terry III, the 5-star wide receiver athlete out of San Antonio? So Nebraska, Texas now, with Oregon still in the mix, but Nebraska, Texas kind of on top for Michael Terry III.
Well, it's good news, obviously, and it goes back to when he said, "I'm going to take my recruitment through the fall." I think Nebraska's like, all right, we'll take our chances then, because I think they liked the football team they were going to put in front of people. They knew the atmosphere that recruits would see. Obviously, Oregon's still 2-0, but I mean, actually, Oregon's kind of scuffled a bit over there, like in some of their games, and Nebraska's looking kind of dominant. And sort of piggybacking off what Bruntz said, it helped too. You're playing a team in Colorado that they come in with a cool factor, right? I mean, they do have that with recruits, and you sort of knock the cool out of their walk. Like there's all these images like on social media of like Jamari Butler, MJ Sherman, like, standing over Shedeur Sanders after sacking him. And you sort of like, you had all these things that they played well in the moment, but they also played well in the days after, like actually like the visual of it that's on social media and all that stuff. So I think that's a big deal. Michael Terry, I think, is one of the biggest prospects Nebraska could land in this class. Obviously, I've always thought they're in the hunt. And he said, "I'm going to let this go a bit. I'm going to let it ride." I think that's a case where Nebraska's like, all right, let's show our stuff. We'll show how we've developed as a program. You can take it or leave it at the end of the day, but I think they're thinking some guys like him might take it. If this program is what Rhule thinks it is in 24.
Bruntz, how big of a step was it in terms of getting over the hump to try to land a guy like Jackson Cantwell to have an environment like Saturday, to have a 5-star 2026 offensive lineman where you have some connection to? He's been to campus, he's been to games before, but you kind of gave him a picture of what things could like if Nebraska really sort of takes off. Could look like, I should.
Yeah. I mean, he was kind of overshadowed a little bit. The fact that he was there, which is hard to do because he's a massive man, human being. But no, I mean, he'd been to games before. He's familiar with that atmosphere. I think he kind of had a baseline for what Nebraska's like. And I mean, I think he saw it kind of go to a different level on Saturday. And I mean, you've talked to him more than I have, but he strikes me as a pretty heady kid. Like he kind of gets what he's looking for. And I mean, I think the connection piece of it's probably pretty big for him. I mean, and I think that's one thing that Nebraska can do pretty well, especially if Matt Rhule's involved in that recruitment, is building that relationship. His mom's from Nebraska, so there's that piece of it. And, again, you kind of get, one crack a year almost, it feels like, at hosting one of those types of recruits for games. And Nebraska certainly took a pretty big swing. But yeah, I mean, that's Nebraska, that's one that Nebraska needs to stay in for as long as they can, because he looks like a ready-made left tackle, without question. I mean, just seeing from where he's been from when Nebraska started recruiting him, I mean, he's every bit of 6'8", 300 pounds. He was standing next to Teddy Prohaska on the sidelines, and he didn't look much smaller by comparison.
Finishing up a little bit of the recruiting stuff here, I talked to Dawson Merritt on Monday. I think Nebraska's got a good shot there should they continue to win. It really feels like to me he's hanging in on the Alabama commitment because he's not convinced that Nebraska is going to be part of the national college football conversation. I think that's a big thing to him. I think he wants to go somewhere where he can win at a high level. But if Nebraska keeps winning, I think there's a lot of momentum in Nebraska's favor in terms of where things are at with his family, his relationship with the staff. I think Nebraska might even want him more than Alabama. And Alabama's recruiting the hell out of him. It's not like they're just letting him go by any means. But should Nebraska keep winning, I think it could go a long way with Dawson Merritt. We have not been able to kind of touch base with Cortez Mills. I think that one's going to be a tricky recruitment regardless. I think he probably saw, all the different ways that he could help Nebraska offensively as a wide receiver. And then, of course, Dylan Raiola is his own recruiting pitch at this point in time. But I just get the sense it's going to be tough to move him off of Oklahoma. And there's so many other teams still likely involved in that recruitment. But it just goes to show wherever things are at, pick a random day, everything is always fluid in recruiting. And Nebraska having the performance that they did and the environment that they did, don't be surprised if some other guys committed elsewhere pop up over on visit lists, throughout the course of the year. I mean, Nebraska, in a way, has built some cachet and is trending. I mean, they may not be Deion Sanders, Colorado cool, but they're certainly more nationally in the picture now, having played the way that they did on Saturday, having Dylan Raiola, having a defense that looks like it would be a lot of fun to be a part of. They have a lot more going for it recruiting wise than maybe where things are at in the summer when everything's just conjecture and talk. Now you can put the visuals up there of what you've actually done and where you hope to go. So a successful recruiting weekend. I think Nebraska's going to pull several commitments out of it. Some still to come, but they did get one in Christian Jones, which we didn't really talk about this, but Nebraska under Matt Rhule so far, Malachi Coleman was top player in the state, was able to keep him from going to Colorado. Carter Nelson was able to keep him from going to Georgia or to Penn State or Notre Dame. And now Christian Jones, you're able to keep him from going to Oklahoma. That's pretty impressive stuff. I mean, we talk about you want to keep the talent close to home. Those are all top 247 guys. Those are all your number one players in the state. And you beat some pretty good teams for them. And so Matt Rhule and Nebraska staff deserves quite a bit of credit for that. All right. Any final thoughts here, gentlemen? Anything you want to get off of your chest before we end the podcast here? Of course, we will have the Hypecast later this week. And then, naturally, there's going to be the post-game podcast for Northern Iowa. It'll probably be another 1 a.m. production. We appreciate those of you that are willing to stay up. Now, I will say this for Northern Iowa. They like to run the football. That clock could be moving throughout. Maybe we could have a nice, tidy 2.5-hour game, and we can all be home before midnight. How does that sound?
They're going to get their commercial breaks whether you like it or not. So
you can't have commercial breaks if the game's still going on. You're going to have to do the side-by-side.
They'll do the kickoff. They'll do the break, kickoff, break. Another break somewhere in there too.
I don't like it, Bruntz.
You got to get that Big Ten. Big Ten's got to get that money.
You're ruining things for me. BT, you got any final thoughts?
My final thought real quick is I think the rule where guys have a targeting penalty called and the it goes into the next half of the next game is the stupidest thing in sports. That's what I think. I'm not saying it because it just happened to Mekhi Bear. I just think it's...
You thought it for a while.
Yeah. No, anytime I see that player, I think it's absolutely ridiculous.
I think that's fair. I don't have any problem with that take. Bruntz, do you want to take the opposite side here so we can stay fair and balanced? Why should Mekhi Bear be suspended?
So he can think about what he's done. That's why. I actually believe it's also pretty dumb as well. So I'm yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, there you have it. Nobody likes the suspension. Second half, first half suspension for targeting. You get a full Husker 24/7 viewpoint on that. You can get full Husker 24. Oh, go ahead.
The NCAA has like a couple dumb rules like that. It's like if
here we go.
If a baseball player gets thrown out of a game, then they miss the next game. So there was a Nebraska player, I forget who it was, but was thrown out in the last game of the season and then had to serve his 1-game suspension the following year, I'm pretty sure.
Was it the third baseman from Minnesota? I can't think of his name. He hit the home run.
I want to say it was Austin Darby, but it was something stupid like that where like it carried over.
Is it Angelo?
Maybe I'm completely misremembering, but
who is there? An Angelo? Like the last name's Angelo? I can't.
Altavilla. It wasn't him.
Yeah. Okay. Well, he hit the massive home run and then admired it for a while.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if he made his own coaching staff or the umpire mad, but I remember that being a thing at one point in time.
No,
I enjoyed Angelo Altavilla. He made that shortstop at Michigan very mad. Very mad. Jack Blomgren. Very, very mad Jack Blomgren. It was that's a deep cut for the Nebraska baseball fans that happen to be listening to this.
He verbally sparred with some fans in the beer garden at Cal Poly too, I remember, which I appreciated as well. He was a hell of a hockey player. He was ready to go at all times. Anyway.
So that was good. I'm glad we got to there. We got that. Okay. I'm going to ask one more time. Any final thoughts that we want to get to?
No, I'm done.
Done.
Everyone's done. But you know where we're not done? We're never done at Husker247.com. It is up all the time. There are stories. Sometimes I'll wake up, guys, and there will be a story on our site that was not there when I went to bed. I had no idea that it was going to be there. And sometimes it's there at like 6 a.m. I get up, I'm checking on Hudson. First thing I do, I'm looking at the website. There's a story. It's great. There's content all the time. 24 hours a day, there is content at Husker 24/7. So we invite you to check that out. Plenty of recruiting coverage. Great stuff from Alan True, Mike Roach, all of our national guys helping out with that. Plenty of team coverage. BC and Bruntz do a phenomenal job with that. I chip in where necessary. But Husker 24/7, that's where you want to get your information. So be sure to check that out. Come back for the Husker 24/7 Hypecast. It might be Northern Iowa. We're still going to get you hyped. We're still going to get you fired up for this matchup. That's what we do around here. So Hypecast later this week, post-game podcast later this week, Sunday side session later this week. There's still a lot of week left to go, and a football game on Saturday. Catch all of the information, everything you need, Husker247.com.